This is Heart of the Guardians, where stories of courage, love, and fate are brought back to life from the forgotten corners of history. If you believe in the power of destiny, then stay until the very end, because what you're about to hear is not just a story, it's a testament to how even in the darkest wilderness, love can find its way. The story begins in the year 1867, in the untamed lands of New Mexico Territory, a place where the sun burned red against the horizon and the air was heavy with the scent of dust, sweat, and blood. The frontier was merciless then. Settlers moved west in search of new beginnings, but for many, it became a journey of suffering, betrayal, and death. Among them was a young woman named Clara Whitmore. She was only 23, the widow of a man she had followed across the plains in hopes of building a new life. But dreams on the frontier had a cruel way of turning into nightmares. Her husband, Thomas, had fallen ill during the long trek west, fever and exhaustion taking his life before they could reach safety. Clara buried him herself near a dry creek bed, with trembling hands and tears she could no longer wipe away. When the settlers' wagon train decided to move on, she pleaded for them to wait, for one more day, one more chance to regain her strength. But fear ruled their hearts. The threat of Apache and Navajo raids was enough to make them abandon her. They left her there, alone, weak, and surrounded by miles of nothing but desert and wind. The last wagon disappeared over the ridge, its dust fading into the evening sky, leaving Clara with only silence and the echo of her own sobs. She tried to survive. For 2 days, she wandered along the trail, clutching the locket her husband had given her, the only piece of him she had left. Her lips cracked from thirst, her dress torn and stiff with dust. Buzzards began circling overhead, the nights grew cold, and the loneliness cut deeper than any blade. On the third night, she collapsed beneath the stars. The last thing she remembered before the darkness claimed her was the sound of hoofbeats in the distance, and a low, haunting whistle that seemed to float across the desert wind. When Clara opened her eyes again, she was no longer on the sand. She was lying inside a small shelter, made of animal hides and wooden poles. A fire flickered beside her, its warmth wrapping around her like a living embrace. She felt a damp cloth on her forehead and the taste of water on her lips. Then she saw him, a tall man with long black hair tied behind his back, his skin bronzed by the sun. His eyes, dark, calm, and steady, met hers without fear or judgment. Around his neck hung a small pendant carved from turquoise. He was Navajo, a warrior by his bearing, yet there was something gentle in the way he moved, something that made Clara's breath catch. He spoke to her in broken English. "You safe now?" he said softly. No fear. For days, he cared for her. He brought her water, crushed roots for medicine, and small pieces of roasted meat. He didn't ask questions, didn't demand anything in return. Clara learned that his name was Tahoma, which in his language meant, the mountain. As she grew stronger, she watched him work. He was skilled in silence, setting traps, mending tools, moving with the rhythm of the earth itself. He would sometimes hum to himself while tending the fire, a deep, melodic tune that seemed older than time. When she tried to thank him, he simply nodded. "Spirit guide me to you," he said once, touching his chest. "You not die alone." Something in those words stirred inside her, a feeling she didn't want to name. One evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, Clara sat outside the shelter, watching Tahoma carve something from wood. "Why did you save me?" she asked quietly. "Your people, they don't trust mine." He looked up, the blade pausing in his hand. "Because heart does not know skin," he answered. "Wind told me someone crying. I follow." That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She lay awake listening to the soft rustle of the fire, the distant howl of coyotes, and the steady rhythm of Tahoma's breathing near her. For the first time in weeks, she didn't feel afraid. Days turned into weeks. Clara began helping him with small tasks, gathering herbs, fetching water, repairing his hides. She learned to understand his language, not just through words, but through gestures, silences, and the look in his eyes. Then one morning, danger came. A group of armed settlers, bounty hunters, by the look of them, rode into the canyon. They had been tracking signs of a Navajo band and believed Clara had been taken captive. They didn't care to hear her side of the story. When they found the camp, Clara ran forward, shouting, "Wait! Don't shoot!" But before she could reach them, one of the men fired. The bullet grazed Tahoma's shoulder, knocking him to the ground. Something broke inside her at that moment. She grabbed the rifle from one of their packs, clumsy and shaking, and stood between Tahoma and the men. "You'll have to kill me first," she screamed. Her words stunned them into silence. The leader spat on the ground. "You're defending an Indian over your own kind." Clara's voice trembled, but her eyes were steady. "He's the only one who showed me kindness. The only one who didn't leave me to die." There was a long, heavy pause. Then the men turned their horses and rode away, muttering curses under their breath. When the sound of their hoofbeats faded, Clara dropped to her knees beside Tahoma. Blood soaked through his shirt, but he smiled weakly. "You fight like fire," he whispered. She pressed her hand against his wound, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You saved me. It was my turn." That night, as he lay recovering, she held his hand for the first time. It felt strange and familiar all at once, the touch of someone who belonged not to her world, but to her soul. As the days passed, they grew inseparable. Tahoma taught her the ways of his people, how to listen to the wind, how to read the signs of the sky, how to walk softly and leave no trace. He showed her a sacred place deep in the canyon, where the water fell in a thin silver ribbon and the walls glowed like copper in the morning sun. "This is where the earth breathes," he said. It was there, one morning, that he took her hand and said, "Clara, you can go back to your people. Or you can stay. Heart knows which path." She looked at him for a long time, the weight of her past and the pull of her future crashing together inside her. Then she said quietly, "I have no people. Only you." They were married in the way of his tribe, under the open sky, with the mountains as witnesses. The ceremony was simple but sacred. He placed a beaded necklace around her neck, and she gave him her husband's old locket in return. It was a promise that love could begin again, even after everything had been lost. Life was not easy for them. There were dangers from both sides, settlers who saw her as a traitor, and tribes who distrusted her presence. But Clara learned to stand tall beside her husband. They built a small home near the river, where the willows grew thick and the air smelled of rain. In time, she bore him a son, dark-haired and bright-eyed like his father. They named him Eli Tahoma, which meant, gift of the mountain. Years later, when the U.S. soldiers came again to push the Navajo people from their lands, Tahoma was forced to fight. Clara begged him not to go, but he said, "If I do not fight, my son will never know his father's home." He rode out with a band of warriors, and never returned. Clara waited for him every night, lighting a small fire by the riverbank. Days turned into weeks, then months. When winter came, she still refused to leave. "He will find his way back," she whispered to their son. "He always follows the wind." One evening, when the first snow fell, she heard that familiar whistle again, the same sound she had heard the night he found her in the desert. She ran outside, heart pounding, but the canyon was empty. Only the wind moved, brushing her hair like a soft hand. Clara sank to her knees, tears falling silently. But in that moment, she knew. He was gone, not lost, but returned to the spirit of the mountain. Years passed, and Clara grew old beside the river. Her son became a bridge between two worlds, speaking both English and Navajo, teaching others that peace could be found in understanding. When she finally passed away, the tribe buried her beside Tahoma, just as she had asked. And when the wind blew through the canyon, the people said they could hear two voices singing together, one in English, one in Navajo, blending into a song of eternal love. This story reminds us that sometimes fate writes its most powerful chapters in the places we least expect, between enemies, across boundaries, and through the kind of love that defies the cruelty of the world. From a dying widow in the desert to a woman who became part of a nation she once feared, Clara's journey is not just a story of survival, but of rebirth. Because love, in its truest form, doesn't ask where you come from, it only asks where your heart belongs. You've been watching Heart of the Guardians, where forgotten souls and untold stories find their voice once more. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who still believes in the power of love against all odds. Until next time, keep the fire burning, and never forget, even in the wildest places, love still finds a way.